This bow was made for beasts, not humans. She drew it without hesitation. The stars outside the window looked like scattered rice on a black cloth. Stood alone in her small room on Helix 7. Frontier world at the edge of known space. She was 28 years old with dark hair tied back and calm eyes that noticed everything on Earth. She had been nobody special here among the stars. She was still nobody special, just a a diplomat's assistant, a paper pusher in a universe full of warriors. She liked it that way. Her fingers touched the wooden curve of the bow hanging on her wall. It was old, very old. Her grandmother had given it to her mother, and her mother had given it to her. The wood was dark from years of oil and sweat and love. The string was new, because strings always needed replacing. But the bow itself had seen 3 generations of her family. Why do you keep that thing? Her colleague had asked. Once. We have plasma rifles now, energy weapons. That bow is ancient history. Had just smiled. It reminds me of home. That was not the full truth, but it was enough truth for strangers. A soft chime told her it was time for the summit. Straightened her uniform and walked out into the bright corridors of the station. Helix 7 was not a planet but a massive space station built into an asteroid. It floated in neutral space, belonging to no species, and that made it perfect for diplomatic meetings. Today, representatives from 12 different species had gathered to discuss trade, routes, and territory. His job was to stand in the corner, take notes, and make sure the human ambassador had water. The meeting hall was enormous. The ceiling rose so high that clouds could have formed up there. Different species needed different environments, so the room was divided into sections with different temperatures and air mixtures. The human stood in the middle section where the air was normal and the gravity was Earth standard. Took her place behind Ambassador Park, tired old man who had been doing this job for 30 years. He nodded at her once, then turned to face the other delegations. They arrived last. They always arrived last. It was their way of showing dominance. There were warriors and they wanted everyone to know it. Each one stood 3 m tall with scales covering their bodies like armor. Their eyes were yellow and cold, and their claws could cut through metal. They had conquered 11 worlds before joining the Galactic Confederation, and they had only joined because fighting the combined might of 400 species was bad mathematics, even for them. Commander led the delegation. He was the largest of them, with scars crossing his face like a map of violence. He looked at the human delegation the way a lion might look at mice. Ah, said his voice deep in rumbling. The humans are here. I almost did not see them. They are so small. Laughter came from the delegation. A few other species joined in, though quietly. Ambassador Park did not react. He had heard worse, kept her face calm, but something cold settled in her stomach. Not anger exactly, just awareness, like a string being slowly pulled tight. The summit continued for hours. Trade routes were discussed. Territory was argued over. They demanded more than their share, as always, and the other species pushed back as always, took notes and fetched water and watched. She was good at watching. Near the end of the first day, stood and made an announcement. Tomorrow, we will hold a ceremonial hunt. All delegations are invited. It is tradition among my people to seal agreements with blood sport. We will hunt the wild beasts of the deep caves. Several species looked uncomfortable. though a small species with 4 arms. And large eyes seemed especially nervous. Their representative, a scientist named Doctor, raised a hand. "Is this hunt mandatory?" she asked. Showed his teeth. "It is expected those who do not participate will be seen as weak." His yellow eyes moved to the human delegation. "Ambassador Parkside, we will send a representative to observe." "Observe," laughed. "Humans cannot participate." "I understand. You are soft creatures who hide behind words. Observation is enough for beings such as you." That night returned to her room. She sat on her bed and looked at the bow. Her grandmother had been a champion archer in Korea. Her mother had been a soldier who carried a bow even when she also carried a rifle. Guns jam, her mother had said. Guns run out of bullets, but a bow only fails if you fail. Had learned to draw her first bow at age 6. By 10 she could hit a moving target. By 15 she could draw weights that grown men struggled with. Her body had been shaped by years of practice, her muscles forged through 10,000 arrows released and 10,000 more. She had not told anyone here about this. Why would she? She was just a note-taker, just another weak human. Next morning, the hunting party gathered. At the entrance to the deep caves, 20 warriors stood in formation carrying plasma rifles and energy spears. Representatives from other species stood back, most of them clearly planning only to watch. Stood among the observers. She had left her bow in her room. There was no reason to bring it. She was only here to observe. The caves were dark and cold. They had installed lights along the main passages, but shadows still gathered in the corners like living things. The air smelled of minerals and something else, something old and dangerous. Walked at the front, his head held high. "We hunt the cave crawlers today," he announced. "Small beasts but fast, good sport for a morning." They walked deeper. Noticed that Doctor had joined the observer. The small scientist carried scanning equipment and looked nervous. Her 4 hands moved constantly, checking and rechecking her devices. "Your heart rate is elevated," Doctor said too. "Are you frightened?" Shook her head. "Just alert." "Interesting. Most humans show fear responses in unfamiliar environments. You show something else." Doctor tilted her head. "I studied your species once. You are persistent predators." "Yes, your ancestors chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion." "Yes, fascinating. Such a strange evolutionary path. Your bodies are not strong, your claws are not sharp, your skin is soft, and yet your species survives." Doctor's large eyes blinked. Howe smiled slightly. "We are stubborn." Roar split the air. It was not the sound of a cave crawler. It was something much larger, much older, much more terrible. The ground shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The warriors raised their weapons, their yellow eyes suddenly wide. From the darkness of a side tunnel, something emerged. It was massive, 8 meters of armored muscle and teeth and claws. Its hide was black as space, and its eyes burned like red stars. Its mouth opened, and the roar came again, shaking bones. "Impossible," whispered. They are extinct." But they did not care about being impossible. It charged. The open fire. Plasma bolts struck the creatures hide and did nothing. The energy scattered like water off stone. This body generated an electromagnetic field that disrupted their weapons. Warriors scattered. Some ran, some died. The creature moved faster than anything that large should be able to move. and then saw them, 3 children they had. Followed the hunting party despite orders to stay behind. Now they cowered against a cave wall, too terrified to run directly in this path. The warriors were in chaos. Their weapons were useless. Their formation had broken. No one was going to save those children. Did not think. She did not plan. She did not weigh her options or consider the consequences. She simply turned and ran. Not away from the beast, but back toward the cave entrance. Her room was not far. Her bow was waiting. Ran. Her feet hit the stone floor in a steady rhythm. Her breathing stayed controlled even as her heart pounded. Behind her the screams and roars echoed through the tunnels. But she did not look back. Looking back would slow her down, and she had no time to waste. The entrance to the caves grew larger. Light from the station flooded in, burst out of the darkness, and kept running. Her room was 7 corridors away. She had counted once out of habit, because her grandmother had taught her to always know her exits. 7 corridors and 1 elevator, but the elevator would take too long. She took the stairs, climbing 3 steps at a time. Her door recognized her face and opened. The bow hung on the wall where she had left it. Beside it was a quiver with 12 arrows. The arrows were her own design, made from modern materials, but following ancient patterns. Carbon fiber shafts, steel tips, feather fletchings, because synthetic materials never flew quite as true. Grabbed the bow and quiver and ran back. She was not thinking about glory. She was not thinking about proving anything. She was thinking about 3 small children with large eyes pressed against a cave wall, waiting to die. She would not let that happen. The cave swallowed her again. She followed the sounds of chaos, moving through tunnels she barely remembered. Twice she took wrong turns and had to double back. Precious seconds were lost. She pushed herself harder. When she finally reached the main chamber, the scene was worse than she had feared. 4 warriors lay dead on the ground, their bodies broken. The others had retreated to the walls, firing uselessly at the creature's electromagnetic field. Turned every energy bolt into harmless light. Commander stood at the front, shouting orders that no one could follow. The children were still alive. They had squeezed into a narrow crack in the cave wall, and they could not reach them, but the crack was shallow. The beast's claws scraped at the stone, widening it bit by bit. It would reach them soon. Doctor was trying to distract the creature. She threw rocks at it, shouted at it, waved her 4 arms. They ignored her completely. It was focused on its prey. Stepped forward. The bow felt right in her hand. It always did. Wood and sinew and horn shaped by hands that had loved it for generations. Her grandmother's fingerprints were probably still embedded in the grain somewhere. She pulled an arrow from the quiver and knocked it. Doctor saw her first. The scientist's large eyes grew even larger. "What are you doing?" she called out. "That is a primitive projectile weapon. It cannot penetrate this hide. Nothing can penetrate." Drew the bow. The world went quiet. Drawing this bow required 80 kg of force. That was 176 pounds in the old measurement system. Most humans could not do it. Most could not do it despite their size, because their shoulders were not designed for this motion. But shoulders were designed for exactly this. She drew the string back to her cheek. Her muscles remembered every hour of training, every dawn practice session with her mother, every evening lesson with her grandmother. Her fingers held the string steady, her eyes focused on the target, not the creature's hide. That would be useless, not its armored back or its scaled sides, its mouth. The roared again, frustrated by the narrow crack protecting its prey. Its jaws opened wide, revealing a throat of soft pink tissue. Released, the arrow flew. It crossed the 20 between her and the creature in less than a heartbeat. It passed through the open jaws and sank deep into the soft tissue at the back of the throat. It kept going, piercing the brain stem. The stopped. It did not roar. It did not thrash. It simply stopped, as if someone had turned off a switch. Then slowly it began to fall. 8 meters of death, and muscle crashed to the ground, sliding forward until it stopped its feet. Silence filled the cave. Did not celebrate. She knocked another arrow and kept her eyes on the dark tunnels around. Them were supposed to be extinct. If there was one, there might be more. Doctor. Scanner beeped. I do not understand, the scientist whispered. Her 4 hands were shaking. That draw weight should be impossible for a human. Your muscle density is not sufficient. Your bone structure should not support. Move, the children said quietly. Get them out of here. Commander stared at her. His yellow eyes were wide, and for the first time since had met him, the warrior looked small. He looked at the dead. He looked at the bow in his hands. He looked at her calm face. How? He said. His voice was barely above a whisper. How did you do that? Kept scanning the tunnels. I practiced. The evacuation was quick after that. Warriors who had been paralyzed by shock suddenly found their courage again. They gathered their dead and wounded. They protected the surviving observers. Doctor personally carried the 3 children to safety. Her 4 arms wrapped around them like a protective cage. Walked at the rear, her bow still ready. They did not encounter another. Perhaps there was only one. Perhaps the others had seen what happened to the first. It did not matter. What mattered was that everyone who could be saved had been saved. When they emerged from the caves, a crowd was waiting. Word had spread about the creature's attack. Medical teams rushed forward. Camera drones swarmed overhead. Representatives from every delegation pushed for a better view. Ambassador Park broke through the crowd and grabbed shoulders. His old face was pale with fear and relief. Are you hurt? What happened? Someone said you killed with a bow. That is impossible. That is completely. I am fine, she said. The children are safe. She tried to move past him, but a wall of bodies blocked her path. Everyone wanted to see the human who had done the impossible thing. Stepped forward. The crowd parted for him because crowds always parted for commanders. He stood before, and even though he was 3 tall and covered in scales and scars, he seemed uncertain. You saved my warriors, he said. You could have run. You could have hidden, but you came back. With that ancient weapon looked up at him. The children were in danger, but they were not your children. They were not even your species. They were children. Was silent for a long moment. Then he reached up and touched the deepest scar on his face. I received this scar in my first battle. I was young and foolish and brave. I thought I understood courage. He looked at the bow in her hands. I did not. He turned and walked away. The crowd began to disperse, but the camera drones remained. By evening, footage of shot had spread across every network in the Galactic Confederation. 1 billion beings watch a small human woman draw a bow. That should have been impossible to draw. and bring down a monster that could not be killed. The headlines varied by species. The networks called it the impossible shot. The networks called it the soft human who roared. One headline from a species had never heard of simply said they are not what they seem. Ignored all of it, she returned to her room and hung the bow back on its hook. She cleaned her remaining arrows and checked the string for damage. She did the things her grandmother had taught her to do after every hunt. Then she sat on her bed and let her hands shake. They had not shaken during the hunt. They never did during. They only shook after. When the danger was past and her body remembered it was supposed to be afraid. A soft knock came at her door. She wiped her eyes and opened it. Doctor stood there, her forearms folded nervously. Behind her stood the 3 children. They were cleaned up now with bandages on small cuts, but their large eyes were very bright. They wanted to thank you. Doctor said softly, I tried to tell. Then you might want to rest, but the smallest child ran forward and wrapped her arms around Leg. She did not say anything. She did not need to knelt down and hugged her back. You are safe. Now, she whispered, you are safe. Doctor watched with those large, curious eyes. I have studied many species, she said. I have never seen one like yours. You are small. You are soft. Your weapons are primitive. And yet, you came back. Doctor shook her head slowly. I would not have come back. I am not ashamed to admit this. The logical choice was to run, but you did not make the logical choice. Smiled sadly. My grandmother used to say that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is more important than fear. What was more important? Looked at the children. Them she did not sleep well that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the falling. She saw the children's terrified faces. She saw the look in Commander's eyes when he realized that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. In the morning, a message waited on her console. It was from an old friend from Earth who had made a career of studying how different species perceived each other. I am coming to Helix 7, the message said. The entire Confederation is asking questions about humans, about what we are about, what we can do. They need answers, and I think you are the only one who can help me give them. Read the message twice. Then she looked at the bow on the wall. Her grandmother had always said that the bow was a teacher. It taught patience. It taught focus. It taught the relationship between effort and result. Perhaps it was time for others to learn. Arrived on Helix 73 days after the incident. He was tall for a Korean man, with messy hair and glasses that he was always pushing up his nose. He carried 2 bags of research equipment and a worried expression. You look the same, said when she met him at the docking bay. You look tired, he replied. Also famous. Do you know that your face is on every information screen in the Confederation? I have noticed. They walked through the station corridors. Aliens turned to stare as passed. Some of them stepped back, others stepped closer as if they wanted to touch her and see if she was real. This is going to be a problem, said quietly. I know. They reached quarter, and she locked the door behind them. Only then did she let her shoulders drop. Only then did she look like the person remembered from university, instead of the legend who had killed monster. Tell me everything, he said. She told him not just about the hunt, but about the days before, the way Commander had mocked humans, the way Other species had laughed the way she had felt herself becoming invisible, shrinking, accepting the role of the weak creature everyone expected her to be. And then the came, she said, and I did not think, I just acted, nodded. Slowly, he had set up a small holographic display and was showing her images of the Confederation's information networks. Every species was discussing what had happened. Some were amazed, some were confused, and some were afraid. They are leading the fear, said. They are saying that humans are dangerous, that we have been hiding our true abilities, that we should be restricted or controlled. That is ridiculous. Is it? Looked at her carefully. I watched the footage. I ran the calculations, drawing that bow should have torn your shoulder apart. The force required, the muscle control needed. It should not be possible for a body your size, but it is possible. I did it, yes. And that is what terrifies them. Brought up a new image. It showed a diagram of a human shoulder compared to a shoulder. Do you know why humans can throw things? I mean, really throw them. Shook her head. No other species in the Confederation can do what we do. Our shoulders evolved specifically for throwing, the way our muscles attach to our bones, the rotation we can achieve, the energy we can store and release. It is unique in the known galaxy. He pointed at the diagram. They are strong. Their muscles can lift more than ours, but their shoulders do not rotate the same way. They cannot transfer power from their legs through their hips, through their core, through their shoulders into a projectile. We can. My grandmother just called it good form. Your grandmother was teaching you how to use a weapon that evolution built into. Your body smiled slightly. Humans are persistent predators. Our ancestors ran prey to death across the African savanna. We do not have claws or fangs or armor. We have endurance and the ability to throw things very, very hard. There was a knock at the door. Opened it to find Doctor standing outside. The small scientist looked agitated, her forearms moving constantly. There is going to be a meeting, Doctor said. All delegation heads that have demanded it. They want to discuss the human question. The human question. Repeated. What to do about your species. Now that everyone knows what you can do. The meeting was held in the same great hall where the original summit had taken place, but the atmosphere was very different now. Representatives who had ignored humans before now watched them with careful eyes. Some looked curious, some looked afraid, some looked calculating. The delegation sat at the center of the opposition. They were tall and thin, with pale skin and 4 eyes that never blinked. Their leader, Lord, had a voice like ice water. The incident in the caves has raised serious questions. Began. A human female using primitive technology killed a Category 9 apex predator that our most advanced weapons could not harm. This demands explanation. Ambassador Park stood slowly. His old bones creaked, but his voice was steady. Acted to save lives. That is all that needs to be explained. But it is not all. Brought up holographic footage of drawing the bow. This should be impossible. Human muscle density is well documented. Human bone structure is well documented. This female should not have been able to draw that weapon, and yet she did. He turned to face the hall. What else are humans hiding? What other impossible abilities do they possess? How can we trust a species that appears weak but is secretly strong? Murmurs filled the hall. Saw worry on the faces of allies. species. She saw suspicion on the faces of those who had never liked humans to begin with. Commander rose from his seat. The hall went silent. The commander walked slowly to the center of the room. He looked at the assembled representatives. I was there, said. I saw what happened. I saw my warriors die because our weapons were useless. I saw that human run into danger instead of away from it. He paused. I called humans weak before that day. I was wrong, perhaps, said smoothly, but being wrong about weakness is not the same as understanding strength. Commander, do you truly know what humans are capable of? Hesitated. That was when stood up. May I speak? He asked. Ambassador Park nodded reluctantly. This had not been planned, but was already walking to the center of the room, his holographic projector in hand. My name is Iama. I have spent my career studying how species perceive each other and how those perceptions are often wrong. He activated his projector, filling the air with images. I would like to answer Lord's question. What are humans? The images showed Earth, green continents and blue oceans. Then they showed Earth history, ice ages and volcanic eruptions, predators with teeth and claws, diseases that killed billions. Earth is what the Confederation classifies as a death world, said they. Gravity is higher than average. The weather is violent. The diseases are aggressive. The predators are many. He looked around the hall. Every human alive today is descended from the survivors, not just survivors of predators, but survivors of ice, survivors of fire, survivors of plague, survivors of each other. He brought up a new image, the human body. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest. We do not have natural armor or venom or claws. He smiled slightly, but we have something else. We have adaptation. We have stubbornness. We have the ability to absorb damage that would kill other species and keep going. This is all well known. Interrupted. You are stalling. Then let me be specific. Brought up the shoulder diagram again. Humans can throw, not just throw, but throw with power that seems impossible. For our size, our ancestors evolved this ability to hunt. A human can throw a spear faster and harder than it can swing a club, despite the being 3 times larger. He looked at archery is just throwing with extra steps. The bow stores energy from the entire body, legs, hips, back, shoulders, arms, and releases it through the arrow. Bow has an 80 kg draw weight. That is not impossible. It is simply the result of training a body that was built for exactly this purpose. Lord stepped forward, and this is supposed to reassure us. You are confirming that humans are dangerous. Every species is dangerous, replied calmly. To have claws that can cut through metal, that have venom that can kill in seconds, that can fit into spaces no other species can reach. He spread his hands. Why should humans be punished for having our own capabilities? Because you hid them. We did not hide them. You did not look. Voice grew harder. For decades, humans have been dismissed as weak, soft, useless. We let you believe this because it was easier, because fighting your prejudice was exhausting, because we did not think we needed to prove ourselves to people who had already decided what we were. He turned to face the full hall. But perhaps that was a mistake. Perhaps we should have shown you earlier what we are capable of, not because we want to frighten you, but because understanding is better than ignorance, he pointed at. The image of the human shoulder, we were built to survive, we were built to adapt, we were built to never give up. You can see this as a threat if you wish, or you can see it as what it actually is, the reason we are still here. Silence filled the hall. Then, slowly, Commander began to clap. The sound echoed through the enormous room. One, then another. Then the delegation joined in, then others. Lord's four eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. When the applause faded, Ambassador Park rose to his feet. I believe we have heard enough for today. The human delegation thanks the commander for his support and the Confederation for its attention. We will continue to act as we always have, with honor, with courage, and with respect for all species. He paused. Even those who fear us. The meeting ended without resolution, but something had shifted. Could feel it in the way representatives looked at her now, not with dismissal, but with curiosity, with respect, and some, yes, with fear, but that was acceptable. Fear and respect were close neighbors, and perhaps being feared a little was better than being invisible. That night sat within her quarters. That was a good speech, she said. It was the truth. He looked at the bow on the wall. Your grandmother would be proud of you. Touch the worn wood, she would tell me. Not to let the fame change me, she would say that the bow is only as good as the person who holds it. Wise woman she was. Smiled sadly. I miss her every day. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless dance, and somewhere in the station, in rooms and corridors and meeting halls, beings of 100 species were learning to see humans in a new way, not as the weak ones, not as the soft ones, but as the ones who ran toward danger instead of away from it. The survivors. The tribunal was called 2 weeks after speech. Lord had been busy during those weeks. He had gathered allies. He had spread rumors. He had turned fear into policy, and now stood in a chamber of judgment, accused of being something she had never asked to be, a weapon. The chamber was round and white and cold. Representatives from every species sat in elevated seats, looking down at her like judges examining a criminal. Her bow had been taken as evidence. It lay on a table beside her, treated like a murder weapon instead of a family treasure. Let the record show. The arbitration AI announced in its neutral voice that this tribunal has been convened to determine the status of the human known as under Confederation Security Protocol 7. The question before us, should this individual be classified as a biological weapon, stood alone in the center of the chamber. Ambassador Park had wanted to stand with her, but the rules did not allow it. Was in the gallery, his face tight with worry. Doctor was there too, her forearms wrapped around herself. Lord rose to speak first. The evidence is clear, he said. This human killed a Category 9 apex predator using only a primitive weapon in her own body. No other species can match this feat. She is by definition a weapon that walks among us. She saved lives. Someone called out. It was one of the representatives. I did not say she was a bad weapon. Replied smoothly. Weapons can be used for good or ill, but they must be controlled, regulated. We do not allow private citizens to carry plasma cannons. Why should we allow them to carry human bodies? The argument continued for hours. Species after species spoke. Some defended, pointing to her actions in the cave. Others supported, arguing that Humans had proven themselves unpredictable. A few tried to find middle ground, suggesting that humans should be required to register their physical capabilities or submit to training restrictions. Through it all, remained silent. She had been told that she would have a chance to speak at the end, so she waited. Finally, the arbitration AI called for her statement. Looked around the chamber. She saw fear in some eyes, hatred in others. She saw curiosity and suspicion in something that might have been hope. She thought about what would say. He would give a scientific explanation. He would quote studies and show diagrams. He would appeal to logic. She thought about what Ambassador Park would say. He would invoke treaties and principles. He would argue about rights and freedoms. He would appeal to law, but was not a scientist or a diplomat. She was an archer, and archers understood one thing above all else: the importance of aiming at the truth. I am not a weapon, she said quietly. The chamber stirred. Lord smiled slightly, as if this denial was exactly what he expected. I am a person, continued. I am a daughter and a granddaughter. I'm a student of a very old tradition. I carry a bow that my grandmother carried and her mother carried before her. It is made of wood and horn and sinew. It has no power source. It has no targeting computer. It is only as deadly as the hand that draws it. She looked directly at you. Ask if humans are dangerous. Yes, every thinking being is dangerous. The question is not what we can do. The question is what we choose to do. She pointed at the bow on the table. I could have left that bow in my room. I could have run when they attacked. I could have hidden with the others and waited for the beast to kill the children. Her voice grew stronger. But I chose to go back. I chose to fight, not because I wanted to prove something, but because 3 small children were about to die, and I had the power to stop it. Chamber was very quiet now. My grandmother taught me that a bow is a teacher, said it teaches patience because you cannot rush a shot. It teaches focus because you must aim with your whole being. It teaches humility because the arrow does not care how important you think you are. She paused. And it teaches responsibility because every arrow you release is a choice you can never take back. She looked around the chamber again. You want to know what humans are? We are the species that runs toward danger. We are the species that refuses to quit. We are the species that looks at impossible odds and says, let me try anyway. This is not because we are weapons. It is because we are stubborn and we care, and we cannot stand by while others suffer. Lord stood. Pretty words, but words do not change facts. You killed a creature that our best technology could not harm. How do we know you will not turn those abilities against us? You do not know, said simply, just as I do not know that you will not use your venom against me, just as I do not know that the will not use their claws against the innocent. We all have the capacity for violence. We all make choices every day about how to use that capacity. She met his 4 unblinking eyes. I choose to protect. What do you choose? Had no answer. The tribunal, recessed for deliberation, was led to a small waiting room where she sat alone with her thoughts. Hours passed. She did not know if she would be imprisoned or freed or something in between. A knock came at the door. Commander entered, filling the small room with his massive presence. I have been watching the proceedings, he said. Your words were not what I expected. What did you expect? Weakness pleading, perhaps tears. He shook his head slowly. I keep expecting you to be what I think humans are, and you keep surprising me. Managed a small smile. My grandmother used to say that expectations are the enemy of truth. She sounds like a warrior. She was in her own way, sat down across from her. Chair groaned under his weight. I have spoken to the delegation. We will vote for your freedom, not because we think you are harmless, we know better now, but because we believe you have earned our respect. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. The vote will be close. Has many allies leaned forward, but I want you to know something. After this is over, whatever the result, I would like to learn your weapon, your discipline, the thing that allows you to stand so calmly in the face of judgment. His yellow eyes were intense. I have been a warrior for 50 years. I thought I understood strength, but when I saw you draw that bow, I realized I understood nothing. Considered this. If I am freed, I will teach whoever wants to learn. That is what the bow is for, not just killing but teaching. The door opened. Again, a tribunal officer stood there. Her face unreadable. The deliberation is complete, she said. Please return to the chamber. Walked back to the center of the white room. The seats were filled again. Every eye was on her. The arbitration AI spoke. The tribunal has voted on the question of whether the human should be classified as a biological weapon under Confederation Security Protocol 7. The result is as follows. Held her breath. 43 species have voted against the classification. 39 species have voted in favor. 18 species have abstained. The AI paused. The motion fails. The human is not classified as a biological weapon. She is free to go. Relief flooded through her, but it was tempered by the numbers. 39 species had voted to imprison her. 18 had not cared enough to decide. The victory was narrow, almost too narrow. Lord rose slowly. His face showed no emotion, but his voice was cold. This tribunal has made its decision. We will accept the result, but let the record show that they warned the Confederation. Humans are not what they seem, and one day you will all regret ignoring that warning. He left without looking back. Ambassador Park helped gather her bow. His hands were shaking slightly. That was too close. He murmured, we need to be more careful. We cannot give them more reasons to fear us. But was looking at the gallery. Was there, nodding slowly. Doctor was wiping her large eyes, and behind them she saw others, representatives from a dozen species, watching her with something that was not fear. It was interest. It was hope. It was the beginning of understanding. After the tribunal was approached by 6 different species asking if she would teach them archery. A junior officer who had survived the attack, an engineer who had watched the footage 100 times, a representative from a species called the who had very long arms and wondered if they might be suited for bow drawing, and others said yes to all of them. You are going to be very busy, observed. Good replied, busy is better than famous, and teaching is better than fighting. She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there other species were still afraid of humans. Other politicians were still planning restrictions and controls. The battle for understanding was far from over, but it had begun, and it had begun with a single arrow, a single choice, and a grandmother's voice echoing across the generations. The bow only fails if you fail. Would not fail. 6 months had passed since the tribunal stood on the observation deck of Helix 7 watching her students practice. The deck had been converted into a training ground with targets set up at varying distances. The floor was marked with positions for stance and footwork. Bows of different sizes hung on the walls, each one designed for a different species. Commander drew his bow slowly. It had taken 3 months to find a design that worked for shoulders. The solution had been a modified crossbow-like mechanism that allowed him to use his arm strength instead of his shoulder rotation. It was not exactly a traditional bow, but had learned that tradition was less important than purpose. Release on the exhale, said quietly. Trust the arrow. Released. The arrow flew true and struck the center of the target. Good, said. Again, beside him, Doctor was practicing with a much smaller bow designed for her four-armed body. She could draw with 2 arms while stabilizing with the other 2, which gave her an unexpected advantage. Her accuracy had improved dramatically over the months. The children from the cave, now officially adopted by Doctor, sat in the corner, watching everything with wide eyes. They were too young to draw bows, but they practiced their stances and their breathing and their focus, believed that you could learn most of archery before you ever touched a weapon. Teacher, one of the children called out, will you tell us the story again? Which story? The one about your grandmother and the wolf smiled. She had told that story many times now. It was a simple tale. Her grandmother, as a young woman, had encountered a wild dog while hiking in the Korean mountains. She had drawn her bow not to kill the dog, but to show it that she was not prey. The dog had turned and walked away. No arrow had been needed. That story teaches us something important, said, walking over to the children. The bow is not just for killing, it is for showing strength. Sometimes showing is enough, but what if showing is not enough? Then you do what must be done, but only then and never with joy. The alarm cut through her words. Red lights flashed across the station. The AI's voice echoed through every corridor. Category 9 threat detected. All personnel evacuate to secure sectors. This is not a drill. Blood went cold. She ran to the nearest information terminal. The display showed scanned data from the deep caves, the same caves where she had killed the first. But this was not one. This was a breeding nest, and the eggs were hatching. There are 12 of them, the AI reported. Correction 15, correction 19. They are emerging rapidly. Estimated time to reach populated sectors, 14 minutes. Commander appeared beside. His face was grim. Our weapons still do not work against them, he said. Electromagnetic field. We have been researching countermeasures, but you do not have 14 minutes finished. She looked around the observation deck. Her students had gathered their bows still in their hands. 15 beings from 7 different species, all of them trained in an ancient human discipline. They were not masters. Some of them could barely hit the target at 20 m, but they were here. Arrow's work, said. We proved that. You proved that. Corrected with one creature. There are nearly 20 now. Then we need nearly 20 archers. Met his eyes. We trained for this. Maybe not consciously, maybe not intentionally, but we trained. Doctor stepped forward, her small body trembling, but her voice steady. I'm not a warrior. I am a scientist, but I have learned from you. Teacher, I will fight if you lead us. One by one, the other students nodded. With the long arms, the junior officer, even the children's guardian, a quiet being named who had started learning archery only a month ago, looked at them all. These were not soldiers. These were diplomats and scientists and administrators who had picked up bows out of curiosity and stayed out of respect. They had no business fighting monsters. But monsters did not care about business. Grab your bows, she said, and follow me. They moved through the station like a strange army, a commander and a human woman at the front, followed by a collection of beings that looked nothing like warriors but moved with purpose. Anyway, station personnel stared as they passed. Some called out questions, others simply stepped aside. The entrance to the deep caves was sealed. Overrode the lock with his command codes. I do not have authority to bring civilians into a combat zone, he said as the doors opened. Then, arrest me later. They descended into the darkness. The first they encountered was young, barely 2 m long. It was still covered in the slime of its egg. It saw them and roared, a thin, reedy sound compared to its parents' thunder, drew and released without stopping. The arrow struck the creature's eye and it fell. Formation, she called out, triangles of 3, cover each other's blind spots. Aim for eyes and mouths. Do not try to penetrate the hide. They moved deeper. The next chamber held 4 creatures. They attacked together, moving with the coordination of pack hunters. Despite being minutes old, students spread out, each triangle covering a section of the chamber. Arrows flew. Not all of them hit their targets. Not all of them hit vital spots, but enough did. Creatures fell. Others retreated into the shadows. On your left. The commander spun and fired. His crossbow hybrid sent an arrow into the open mouth of a lunging. The creature crashed to the ground at his feet. I see why you love this weapon, said, breathing hard. It is satisfying. They pushed forward. The main chamber was worse. A dozen creatures waited there, circling a central mass that realized was the breeding queen. Massive beast, 3 times larger than any other, covered in armored plates. The queen produces the electromagnetic field, doctor said, her scanner active. Despite the chaos, kill her and the others become vulnerable to energy weapons. Where is her weak spot? I am scanning there, the junction between head and body. The armor is thinner there, but the junction was protected. The queen had positioned herself so that her children formed a living shield around her vulnerable point. We cannot get a clear shot, said, studied the chamber. The ceiling rose high above them, lost in shadows. The walls were covered with empty eggs, and between the queen and her children there was just enough space if someone was willing to get very, very close. Cover me, she said. No. But she was already moving. She ran straight toward the arrows flew around her students covering her approach, keeping the creatures distracted. She ducked under slashing claws. She jumped over snapping jaws. She moved like water through stones, like wind through trees. Her grandmother had always said that archery was not about strength, it was about flow, about becoming one with the moment. Became one with the moment. She slid between 2 creatures, rolled under a third, and came up directly in front of the queen. The massive beast reared back, surprised that something so small had reached her, drew her bow. 80 kg of force flowed through her body. Years of training, decades of tradition, generations of practice, all focused Into a single point, she released. The arrow flew true. It struck the junction. Between head and body, it pierced the thin armor. It found the brain. Queen fell, and with her fall, the electromagnetic field vanished. Voice echoed through the chamber. Energy. Weapons online. All station security. Opened fire. Plasma bolts filled the air. The remaining, suddenly vulnerable, fell one by one. In minutes it was over. Stood alone in the center of the chamber, surrounded by fallen monsters. Her bow was still in her hand. Her breathing was steady. Her hands did not shake. They would shake later. They always did, but for now she was calm. Commander walked up to her. His armor was scorched and green blood stained his scales, but he was smiling, or what passed for a smile on a face. You are terrifying, he said. I know that was a compliment. He looked around at the carnage. They will hear about this. They will use it to spread more fear about humans. Let them met his eyes, but the other species will hear something different. They will hear that humans fight beside their friends. They will hear that we run toward danger, not away from it. And they will hear that we teach our ways to anyone willing to learn. She held out her bow to him, stared at it. What is this? A gift. This bow belonged to my grandmother and my mother. It belongs to my family, and you have proven yourself worthy of being family. The commander took the bow in his massive hands. For a moment he seemed unable to speak. I will carry it with honor, he finally said. I know you will. Later, when the celebrations were over and the reports were filed and the politicians began their endless arguments about what had happened, stood on the observation deck. Alone, she looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were learning to see humans differently. Not as weak creatures who hid behind words. Not as dangerous weapons who needed to be controlled, but as something more complicated and more wonderful. As survivors, as teachers, as friends. Her grandmother had once told her that the bow was a bridge. It connected the archer to the target, the past to the future, the individual to something greater than themselves. Had built a bridge today, she would keep building it tomorrow, and when she finally returned to her quarters, she began crafting a new bow, not to replace the one she had given away, but to continue what her grandmother had started. One bow, one arrow, one choice at a time. The stars looked down on Helix 7, and the stars did not care about the politics of small beings. But somewhere in the vastness of space, shift was happening. A story was spreading. A legend was being born. Not of a weapon, but of a woman. Not of destruction, but of purpose. And in the heart of a frontier station, a dozen species continued to gather each morning to practice an ancient art. They drew bows they should not have been able to draw. They hit targets they should not have been able to hit. They learned patience and focus and the strain human truth that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision that something else was more important. Smiled and knocked an arrow. The story was just beginning.